What if the monarchy's greatest scandal wasn't in the past, but unfolding right now? What if the very man set to be king, Prince William, had just drawn a line in the sand so sharp, so unforgiving, that it threatened to shatter the royal family beyond repair? Tonight, we dive into the move that has Meghan and Harry trembling in California, a move whispered about in palace corridors, debated by lawyers under the cover of night, and one that could change the monarchy forever. You've heard of royal scandals before. We've seen abdications. We've seen divorces. We've seen tell-all interviews that shook the throne. But this is something different. This is the heir to the throne taking a weapon rarely used in royal history, the law. Not diplomacy, not quiet dignity, not stiff upper lip. Legal power. Imagine the headlines. The monarchy suing its own blood. Imagine the family photos ripped apart, the staged smiles gone, and behind them, years of resentment igniting like gasoline. Can you picture it? Because William can, and he's no longer hesitating. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Why now? Why this moment? That's the question echoing across Britain, the United States, and the gilded halls of every newsroom chasing royal drama. Harry and Meghan's Netflix deals, their memoirs, their constant interviews, all dripping with stories of palace cruelty and betrayal. Stories that may sell books, drive streaming numbers, and bring sympathy, but that, according to William, are bleeding the monarchy dry of its dignity. For him, it isn't entertainment. It isn't freedom of speech. It's sabotage. And William has decided that silence is no longer noble. Silence, in fact, may be the monarchy's downfall. Picture the scene. A cold autumn night, Buckingham Palace glowing against the dark sky, a handful of men and women in black suits slipping into a side door away from photographers. Lawyers, advisors, strategists. They gather in a chamber so private that even some courtiers are barred from entering. And at the head of the table, William, not just the dutiful son anymore, not just the supportive brother, the future king, finally wielding his authority. His message is clear. It's time to protect the monarchy's image with everything they have. And if that means taking his own brother and sister-in-law to court, then so be it. But here's the contradiction, the gut punch, the irony. The monarchy has always thrived on its mystery, its silence, its refusal to get down in the mud. That was Queen Elizabeth's way. She never explained, she never complained. She endured. And William, he adored her for it. But now, he's flipping that tradition on its head. Because while his grandmother survived with silence, William sees silence as surrender. And that decision could rewrite the rules for every monarch who comes after him. And think about Meghan and Harry for a moment. They left Britain shouting about freedom, about finding their voices. They claimed they were shackled by palace control, silenced by the system. And yet, in their quest to speak, they built a business model around royal storytelling. Netflix didn't want Harry and Meghan, the couple. Netflix wanted the Sussexes, the royal insiders. The memoir didn't sell because Harry is a writer. It sold because Harry is a prince. And that is the very nerve William has decided to strike. He's saying, you can't have it both ways. You can't profit off the crown while mocking it. And if you try, the crown will stop you. Now, imagine being Harry, the younger brother who followed William into war zones, into childhood grief, into the scrutiny of millions. He once looked at William as his shield. Now that same brother is leading a campaign that could destroy everything he's built in California. And Meghan? The woman who saw herself as a disruptor, a modernizer, someone who could bend the monarchy into something new? She's staring down the reality that William isn't bending. He's breaking. But here's the part no one wants to admit. This isn't just about legality. It's about love, betrayal, and legacy. William believes he is protecting his children, George, Charlotte, and Louis. Protecting their right to inherit a monarchy unsullied by reality TV-style exposés. Protecting their childhood from being dissected in another Netflix episode. And yet, the more he protects, the more fractured his family becomes. Isn't that the cruel twist of royal life? To save the crown, you often lose the people you love. Ask yourself, should family disputes ever leave the walls of home? Should brothers ever bring lawyers into their battles? Or has Harry already broken that rule, forcing William to respond in kind? The contradiction is dizzying. The brother who begged for privacy, now trading secrets for checks. The brother who once swore to honor tradition, now preparing to weaponize modern law against his own blood. Who's right? Who's wrong? Or is this a story where no one wins? The public is divided. Some call William brave, finally showing that the monarchy is not a punching bag. Others whisper that he's gone too far, that by suing, he looks desperate, thin-skinned, afraid of the very stories Harry and Meghan tell. But beneath the headlines lies something deeper. This is not just about a Netflix show or a memoir. This is about the future of the monarchy itself. Because if Harry and Meghan are allowed to profit unchecked, what stops future ex-royals from doing the same? What stops the crown from becoming a commodity? William isn't just fighting his brother. He's fighting a precedent. And the palace knows it. Insiders whisper about historical parallels. Edward VIII giving up the throne for love, only to spend his life bitter and exiled, selling stories to the press. The echoes are haunting. William, the grandson of Elizabeth II, cannot allow history to repeat itself. He has studied the mistakes of past monarchs, and he's determined not to add his name to the list of weak heirs. But in doing so, he risks being remembered not as the strong protector of the crown, but as the brother who declared war on his own flesh and blood. The stakes couldn't be higher. On one side, the glittering promise of freedom and money in America. On the other, the ancient weight of crown and country. And in the middle, William, calm on the outside, but inside, a storm of anger, grief, and fear that his family's legacy could crumble. So here's the question for you. Do you think William is right to strike now? Or is this the move that will forever stain his reign before it even begins? Can you really protect the monarchy by dragging it through the mud of courtrooms and headlines? Or is this the only way to stop an unstoppable media machine? And here's the twist you didn't see coming. This wasn't just a plan whispered in abstract. No, a document exists. Drafted, sealed, hidden within the palace walls. It's words sharp as knives. Words that, if revealed, would leave Harry and Meghan stunned. Words that could shatter Hollywood alliances, Netflix dreams, and even the fragile line that still ties Harry to his birthright. The lawyers call it unprecedented. The courtiers call it dangerous. And William? He calls it necessary. But what exactly is inside that document? What accusations are being made? And how far is William willing to go to protect the crown? Because the truth is, the battle isn't coming someday. It's already begun. You just haven't seen the full picture yet. And here's where we leave you hanging, for now. Because in the very next chapter, we'll step behind that palace door and uncover the secret legal summit that set this entire war in motion. Lawyers in midnight meetings. Advisors with trembling hands. And William, staring down the papers that could define his reign. But be warned, what he decided in that room may change not only the monarchy's future, but his brother's life forever. What happens when the palace doors close, the chandeliers dim, and only the most trusted voices are allowed inside? What happens when the heir to the throne summons lawyers, strategists, and loyal courtiers into a midnight gathering that history was never meant to record? That is exactly what unfolded the night Prince William decided that enough was enough. The legal summit. The turning point. The moment whispers of gossip became blueprints for war. Think of it. Buckingham Palace, its grand facade glowing in the London night. Tourists scattered hours ago, the press parked outside unaware. Yet within its ancient walls, the future of the monarchy's survival was being drafted, not in declarations of tradition, but in cold, clinical legalese. And William, stoic, composed, but with fire behind his eyes, sat at the head of a table carved by centuries of royal power. What was being discussed wasn't ceremonial, wasn't symbolic. It was nuclear. Why nuclear? Because suing Harry and Meghan isn't like suing a stranger. It isn't like protecting a logo or defending a company. It's suing blood. It's suing memory. It's suing the very narrative of Diana, their mother. Do you see the contradiction? The monarchy thrives on image, yet to protect that image, William would have to publicly declare his brother an enemy. The lawyers shuffled papers. Each document bore possibilities, each line a weapon or a risk. One advisor whispered that no royal in modern times had dared use legal muscle against another royal in such a direct way. But William leaned in, his voice steady. If they trade on the crown, they will answer to it. Those words hung heavy in the air. Can you imagine saying that about your own sibling? Can you imagine knowing that every childhood memory you shared was now buried beneath litigation? Now, here's the twist. The monarchy has sued before. Newspapers, tabloids, paparazzi, privacy breaches. But never like this. Never against one of their own. And that's what made this meeting historic. The advisors warned of backlash. The people will see this as cruelty, sir. But William's reply was chilling in its clarity. And what do they see now? Weakness. This is where it gets personal. For William, this wasn't only about Netflix documentaries or memoirs filled with grievances. It was about control. Every monarchy in history falls when it loses control of its narrative. And Harry and Meghan? They weren't just losing control. They were handing it to the highest bidder. To streaming giants. To publishers. To interviewers waiting for the next soundbite. William saw it as a slow bleed. And like a battlefield commander, he decided it was time to cauterize the wound, no matter how painful. So what exactly was on the table that night? Imagine the files spread before them. Lists of Harry and Meghan's deals, multi-million-dollar Netflix contracts, Spotify experiments, interview transcripts, publishing rights. The lawyers outlined how each one could be challenged, restrained, or outright blocked under UK and international law. Meghan's defenders in Hollywood might call it censorship. But William's team framed it differently. Protection of intellectual property, preservation of royal trademarks, defense of the monarchy's integrity. One advisor pointed out an uncomfortable truth. The monarchy itself is a brand. Its likeness, its rituals, its secrets, these are commodities. And in Meghan and Harry's hands, those commodities were being sold. Doesn't that change everything? The crown, once untouchable, reduced to a storyline in a Netflix pitch deck. William refused to stand by. The build-up intensified as discussions turned to logistics. Would they pursue injunctions to stop future content? Could they claw back royalties from Harry's memoir? Would they risk open court, where Harry might counter by exposing even darker secrets? The contradictions tangled like vines. To silence Harry might mean giving him the very stage he craved, a courtroom where every grievance could be aired. And yet, to stay silent meant surrender. Picture William listening, silent, weighing the risks. His jaw set, his eyes fixed not on the advisors but on a portrait hanging nearby. His grandmother, Queen Elizabeth II. She had built her reign on silence, dignity, the quiet endurance of scandal after scandal. And William? He was about to torch that playbook. Because he knew what Elizabeth never had to face. A world of streaming, social media, endless podcasts, endless exposure. In this new battlefield, silence isn't dignity. Silence is death. And then came the draft. A thick envelope slid across the polished table. Inside, the first outline of legal action. The language was sharp, deliberate, and, if made public, devastating. It accused Harry and Meghan of breaching trust, of misusing royal narratives, of trading on titles for profit. One line in particular left the room breathless. The Crown reserves the right to pursue any individual, including members of the royal household, who act against the dignity of the monarchy. Do you feel the weight of that? Including members of the royal household. That was William's message. No exceptions. No mercy. Even his own brother was not immune. At that moment, an advisor asked the question that lingered in everyone's minds. What if this destroys the family bond beyond repair? And William, with eyes cold as stone, replied, "What bond is left to protect?" Let that sink in. What bond is left to protect? In that one phrase, William confirmed what many had suspected but few dared say aloud. He no longer saw Harry as his brother. He saw him as a liability. The night dragged on. Coffee cups emptied. Lawyers scribbled notes. The air grew heavier, thicker, as the implications crystallized. William wasn't just talking about a lawsuit. He was talking about reshaping the monarchy's relationship with its own bloodline. And that realization left even the toughest legal minds uneasy. But here's where it gets even more startling. As dawn approached, one of the youngest aides, a newcomer to the palace machine, dared to speak. "Sir, once this begins, there's no going back. It will be the monarchy versus the Sussexes, brother against brother, for the world to see." And William, without a moment's hesitation, answered, "Then let them see." And that was it. The decision was made. The plan set in motion. The legal war had begun. though the public had no idea yet. But Harry and Meghan? They were about to find out. Because across the ocean, in Montecito, their inbox was about to receive an email that would shatter their carefully built Californian empire. But what exactly did that email say? How did Meghan react when the words appeared on her screen? And what desperate move did Harry make in response that would only dig the hole deeper? Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if one email threatened to unravel everything you'd built? Imagine sitting in your multi-million-dollar California mansion, sipping morning coffee, sunlight pouring across the kitchen island, when suddenly a notification pings. You open it casually, maybe expecting a message from Netflix, a note from Spotify, or an update from your PR team. But instead, you find words so sharp, so cold, that they freeze you in place. That was Meghan Markle's morning. That was Harry's rude awakening. The subject line was simple, direct, almost understated, notice of intent. For Harry and Meghan, the email might as well have been a thunderclap. The body contained legal jargon, phrases dripping with formal weight, but the meaning was crystal clear. Buckingham Palace was preparing to challenge their empire. It wasn't tabloids this time. Not paparazzi. Not whispers from courtiers. No, this was Prince William himself, backed by palace lawyers, moving to legally restrict their ability to profit from royal stories. Think about that for a moment. The very foundation of their financial independence, Netflix documentaries, tell-all memoirs, high-profile interviews, was being targeted. Without those stories, what would remain? Without their royal ties, would Meghan and Harry still be Hollywood's golden couple, or would they be just another celebrity pair struggling to keep the spotlight? Meghan's hands reportedly trembled as she scrolled through the dense paragraphs. Every line seemed to close in on her, boxing her into a corner. Her empire, built on narrative and image, suddenly felt fragile. Isn't that the contradiction? She had left the monarchy to gain freedom, but her freedom depended on the very monarchy she thought she had escaped. Harry, meanwhile, reacted differently. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. The brother who had once shared his grief, who had walked behind their mother's coffin with him, who had sworn loyalty as siblings, was now the same brother who wanted to silence him. Harry's voice cracked as he read the words aloud, disbelief turning to fury. He's treating me like an enemy, Harry spat, pacing the kitchen. My own brother. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Meghan wasn't only worried about William. She was worried about Hollywood. Because Hollywood doesn't like uncertainty. Studios, streaming services, and publishers invest millions into contracts. If legal battles threaten to derail projects, those same partners might quietly back away. And the truth is, they already had doubts. Netflix had seen the backlash. Spotify had seen the headlines. Hollywood can turn cold quickly, and William's move had just sent a chill across Meghan's carefully cultivated empire. So what did Meghan do? She picked up the phone, not to Harry's old friends, not to British insiders, but to Hollywood power players, agents, lawyers, executives. She needed reassurance, strategy, protection. But what she got instead was hesitation. One contact reportedly warned her bluntly. If this goes to court, we can't guarantee you'll keep your deals. Nobody wants to be caught in the crossfire with Buckingham Palace. Imagine hearing that. Imagine realizing your allies were already calculating how to distance themselves. And then came the contradiction that haunted Harry. For years, he had accused the palace of controlling his every move, stripping him of independence, silencing his voice. Yet now, faced with William's legal threat, Harry did something that exposed his deepest vulnerability. He picked up the phone and called King Charles. Yes, the very institution he rebelled against. The father he publicly criticized in interviews. The man he painted as emotionally distant. Harry dialed his number, desperate for intervention. Can you picture that phone call? Can you imagine the weight of that silence on the other end of the line before Charles answered? According to insiders, Harry pleaded. His voice cracked, filled with both anger and desperation. You can't let William do this. He's trying to destroy me. For Charles, it was a moment of cruel irony. The son who accused him of neglect now begging for protection. The contradictions of family loyalty and betrayal colliding in real time. And what did Charles say? Did he rush to defend his younger son? Did he promise to rein in William? No. His words reportedly left Harry stunned into silence. There are consequences for every choice, Harold. You made yours. Cold. Final. Almost royal in their detachment. Can you hear it? The father speaking not as a parent, but as a monarch, reminding Harry that the crown comes before kin. That was the moment Harry realized Charles would not save him. Meanwhile, Meghan wasn't idle. If Harry turned to family, Meghan turned to media. She began sketching ideas for a counter-narrative. Another interview, perhaps. A documentary add-on. Maybe even a second book. Her instinct was always to fight fire with fire, story with story. But this time, the risk was higher. Because for every revelation she threatened to drop, William had lawyers ready to strike. And here's the irony. The more Meghan planned her counterattack, the stronger William's case became. The hours turned into days. The Montecito mansion felt less like a sanctuary and more like a bunker. Phones buzzed with advisors offering conflicting strategies. Some urged caution, do not respond. Wait it out. Others whispered rebellion, strike first. Go public. Frame William as the aggressor. And all the while, Hollywood's silence grew louder. No new offers. No warm invitations. Just polite distance. The very world Meghan had bet everything on was hesitating, watching, calculating. Would they stick with the Sussexes if the crown itself was moving against them? Or would they quietly walk away? Ask yourself, what would you do if every path forward seemed blocked? Do you retreat, accept the limits, and live quietly? Or do you double down, risking everything to fight back? Harry and Meghan chose the latter. They decided not to shrink, but to resist. And that resistance began with Meghan making one phone call to a Hollywood ally she believed would never abandon her. But what she didn't know, what neither of them realized, was that this ally carried a secret of their own. A secret that, once revealed, would not only shake Meghan's confidence, but would tilt the entire legal battle in William's favor. Because sometimes the most dangerous blow doesn't come from your enemy. It comes from the friend you thought you could trust. What happens when the friend you trust most becomes the one who delivers the deadliest blow? What if the ally you believed would protect you, defend you, and shield you from the storm was secretly carrying a truth that could dismantle your empire from the inside out? That was the chilling reality Meghan Markle faced as she dialed a familiar Hollywood number, the number of someone she believed would never betray her. The call began warmly. Meghan's voice was calm, practiced, the way she always handled moments of crisis. She explained William's legal move, the email that had rattled her and Harry, the looming threat of injunctions that could silence their projects. She framed it, as she always did, as a fight for freedom, a struggle against a monarchy that refused to evolve. We can't let them win, Meghan insisted. We've come too far. We've built too much. On the other end of the line, there was silence. A long, careful pause. And then came words Meghan did not expect. There's something you need to know, the voice said. Something that might change how you fight this. Can you feel that? The sudden shift in energy, the realization that not all allies are as loyal as they seem. The secret was devastating. This insider revealed that executives at Netflix, the very company that poured millions into Harry and Meghan's brand, were quietly panicking. William's legal threats had spooked them. Meetings were already being held behind closed doors, lawyers weighing whether to cut ties early to avoid entanglement with Buckingham Palace. And here's the cruel twist. Meghan wasn't being told this by her enemies. She was hearing it from a friend. Meghan's breath caught. Her instincts told her to argue, to deny. But deep down, she knew. She had already sensed the chill in recent calls with Netflix executives. The vague answers. The lack of enthusiasm about upcoming projects. The sudden requests for revised scripts. Now it all made sense. The empire she had sold as unstoppable was suddenly cracking under the weight of legal pressure. And William hadn't even filed the lawsuit yet. Harry, when Meghan relayed the conversation, erupted in fury. He slammed his fist against the kitchen counter, his voice shaking with anger. So they're going to abandon us? After everything? After the deals, the headlines, the numbers? His words were sharp, but behind them lay something rawer. Fear. Fear of irrelevance. Fear of being discarded not just by his family, but by the very world he thought had embraced him. But here's the contradiction, the heartbreaking irony. Harry had always despised the press, the institutions that treated him like a commodity. Yet in America, he had willingly turned himself into a product, sold through streaming, books, and interviews. Now, stripped of the royal shield, he realized just how transactional that world could be. Loyalty wasn't loyalty. It was business. And business will always bow to power. Meanwhile, back in London, William's team was moving with precision. Legal drafts multiplied. Advisors mapped every angle. Even public relations experts were looped in, preparing statements that painted William not as a vengeful brother, but as a responsible future monarch acting in defense of the crown. The strategy was airtight. Portray Harry and Meghan as reckless profiteers, while William stood tall as the protector of dignity. The tension only grew as rumors leaked to the press. Headlines began to swirl. Palace prepares legal strike. William to silence Sussexes? Journalists speculated, commentators debated. And here's where it got even more dangerous. Every headline, every rumor, made Hollywood even more nervous. No studio wants to invest millions into a story that could be shut down by a courtroom. So Meghan did what she always did when cornered. She tried to control the narrative. Plans for an emergency interview began to take shape. She reached out to producers, floated the idea of a sit-down where she could frame William as the aggressor. The palace was being cruel, she would argue. William was punishing her for speaking her truth. But Harry? Harry wasn't convinced. Every time we speak, Harry warned, we make their case stronger. They'll say we can't stop exploiting them. It was one of those rare moments where Harry's instincts clashed with Meghan's strategies, and it exposed the rift between them. Was Harry ready to wage another media war? Or was he beginning to regret the battles they had already fought? Now, pause and think about this. Imagine being in Harry's shoes, torn between your wife's relentless fight and your brother's ruthless defense of the crown. On one side, love and loyalty. On the other, history and duty. How would you choose? Could you? And here's where William's move became even more brilliant, even more devastating. Because his legal threat didn't just target Harry and Meghan's businesses. It targeted their relationship. By forcing them to decide how to fight back, William planted seeds of division between them. Seeds that, if nurtured by stress and fear, could grow into cracks wide enough to destroy their partnership. But let's not forget, the palace wasn't just working behind the scenes. One particular aide, emboldened by William's confidence, took a bold step. They leaked a portion of the draft legal letter to the press. Not the full text, just enough to send shockwaves. And what it revealed was explosive. The leaked section claimed that Harry and Meghan had knowingly misrepresented events within the royal household for commercial gain, and that the crown had the right to pursue damages for the exploitation of royal narratives. Imagine the headlines. Imagine the frenzy. Suddenly, the world wasn't just asking whether Harry and Meghan had been wronged. They were asking whether Harry and Meghan had lied. Meghan's reaction was immediate and furious. She called her lawyers, demanded counterstatements, prepared fiery responses. But Harry? He froze. That single word, misrepresented, struck him like a dagger. Because deep down, he knew there were details in his memoir, in their interviews, in their Netflix show, that were exaggerated. Not lies exactly, but shaded, curated, dramatized. And now, the crown was daring to call him out. That night in Montecito was chaos. Advisors rushing in and out. Phones buzzing nonstop. Harry pacing, Meghan scribbling notes, both caught in a storm that seemed impossible to escape. And through it all, one question haunted them. If this was just a leak, what would the full letter contain? What secrets, what accusations, what weapons had William chosen to unleash? The world was about to find out. Because William wasn't finished. He had one more move planned, one that would take the legal war from private chambers into the global spotlight. A move that would turn whispers into headlines, and headlines into a battle that neither side could ever retreat from. And when that move came, it wouldn't just be Harry and Meghan who felt its sting. It would be Hollywood. It would be the press. It would be every single ally they thought they could trust. Because what came next wasn't just legal strategy, it was William's declaration of total war. What does total war look like when it's not fought with tanks and guns, but with lawyers, headlines, and billion-dollar contracts? What happens when a crown, an ancient institution built on secrecy, decides to drag its enemies into the most public arena possible? That was William's next move. And make no mistake, this wasn't just a warning shot. This was the full declaration. The palace decided to go public. Not by accident, not through whispers, but with a carefully orchestrated, deliberate strike. A senior palace spokesperson appeared in front of cameras one gray London morning, reading a statement drafted with William's full approval. The world leaned in. And then, the bombshell. The Crown is prepared to take necessary legal steps to protect the dignity of the monarchy against the ongoing commercial exploitation of its image, history, and private family matters. Do you hear that phrasing? Dignity, exploitation, family. 3 words that cut like blades. The room of journalists erupted into a storm of questions. Were they talking about Harry and Meghan? Would this affect the Netflix deals? Could William truly sue his own brother? The spokesperson refused to elaborate, but everyone knew. The target was clear. Now, think about the impact of that statement. It wasn't just news, it was global shockwaves. Within hours, every major outlet carried the story. CNN, BBC, Sky News, The New York Times. The headlines weren't subtle. William declares legal war. Palace threatens Harry and Meghan's deals. Monarchy draws line against California couple. And here's the irony. For years, Harry and Meghan claimed they wanted to step away from the royal machine, to carve their own path. But now, their relevance was once again tethered to the very institution they tried to escape. Without the monarchy, they were celebrities. With the monarchy as their adversary, they were news. Doesn't that contradiction sting? In Montecito, panic set in. Meghan scrolled frantically through Twitter, watching hashtags trend. Hashtag royal revenge, hashtag William versus Harry, hashtag monarchy strikes back. The public was divided, but the damage was undeniable. Netflix executives called emergency meetings. They wanted answers. Could they move forward with projects without risking lawsuits? Should they delay releases? Some even suggested canceling outright. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. The woman who once believed she could bend Hollywood to her will was suddenly being treated like a liability. Imagine Harry, watching his life unravel yet again. This time not from tabloid lies, but from his own brother's deliberate assault. And yet, here's the emotional contradiction. A part of Harry still longed for William's approval. Deep down, he didn't just see a lawsuit. He saw his brother's rage, his brother's rejection. Was this truly about the monarchy? Or was this William's way of saying, "You crossed the line, and I'll never forgive you"? Meanwhile, in Britain, William's approval ratings soared. Supporters called him strong, decisive, finally showing backbone against what they called Sussex betrayal. Even critics admitted his stance was bold. And here's where the twist lies. Every surge in William's popularity only deepened Harry's isolation. The man who once carried the role of spare was now painted as the enemy of the crown. The legal machinery churned forward. Teams of lawyers filed motions, drafted letters, prepared injunctions. Rumors swirled that William's team might seek to block Harry from using his title in commercial projects. Imagine that, Harry, stripped of the ability to market himself as Prince Harry in any media deal. Without the title, the value plummets. And Meghan knew it. Hollywood noticed too. Suddenly, contracts were questioned. Future deals hesitated. Meghan received polite but distant emails from producers. "We'll circle back once the legal matters are resolved." Circle back. The 2 words no Hollywood figure wants to hear. It means interest is fading. But William wasn't just playing defense. He went on offense. His lawyers reached out directly to streaming platforms, warning them of potential legal consequences if they continued to broadcast content that misrepresented or exploited royal narratives. It was a power move. Studios hate lawsuits. Investors hate risk. William knew exactly where to hit: Hollywood's wallet. The contradiction grew sharper. Meghan, once celebrated as a feminist icon who challenged the establishment, now found herself accused of exploitation. Harry, who once said he left to protect his family from harm, now found himself painted as the one harming the crown. And William, often criticized for being cautious and reserved, suddenly looked ruthless, calculating, unshakable. The roles had flipped. Now, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, was William protecting the monarchy, or was he punishing his brother? Was this justice or revenge? The world debated fiercely. But for Harry and Meghan, debate didn't matter. Consequences did. Their lawyers urged caution, warning that fighting William in court could backfire spectacularly. But Meghan's instinct was different. She saw an opportunity. If they want to silence us, she told Harry, then we have to speak louder. Plans for a counter-interview gained momentum. Meghan envisioned it. Her and Harry sitting across from a trusted interviewer, eyes filled with pain but voices unbroken, painting William as a tyrant. The palace wanted to protect dignity. Meghan would accuse it of cruelty. The palace accused her of exploitation. Meghan would frame herself as a survivor silenced yet again. But here's the trap. Every move Meghan considered only played into William's hands. Because the more she spoke, the more evidence he could use to prove his case. Every revelation, every detail, every truth became another potential misrepresentation to challenge. And then came the breaking point. One morning, Harry opened his inbox to find a letter. Not an email this time. A physical letter, embossed with the royal crest. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Its message was blunt. Any further public disclosures of private royal matters will be met with immediate legal action in court. No negotiation. No softening. Just a final warning. Harry stared at the letter for hours. His hands shook. He thought of Diana, of the promises he made to honor her memory. He thought of his children, Archie and Lilibet, and what future he was leaving for them. Was he protecting them, or was he dragging them into a war they never asked for? The tension between him and Meghan boiled over. He accused her of pushing too far, of turning every slight into a spectacle. She accused him of weakness, of letting William bully them into silence. Their voices rose, their arguments sharp, their once united front cracking. And that was exactly what William had counted on. Because William's greatest weapon wasn't the law. It wasn't even public opinion. It was doubt. By planting seeds of doubt between Harry and Meghan, he was dismantling them from the inside. But just as Meghan prepared to double down, just as Harry considered retreating, something unexpected happened. A new player entered the stage. Someone neither side anticipated. Someone who had the power to tip the balance in a way no lawyer, no journalist, and no Hollywood executive could. Because sometimes the fiercest battles aren't fought by the people on the front lines, but by the shadows behind them. And when this figure stepped forward, everything Harry and Meghan thought they knew about their fight with William was turned upside down. Yes, the very company that had once written Harry and Meghan a check so large it stunned Hollywood now stood at the crossroads of a royal battlefield. Executives who once toasted the Sussexes as their golden ticket into royal storytelling had grown nervous. Too nervous. William's legal threats weren't just noise, they were fire alarms. And Netflix, a company obsessed with protecting its brand and its investors, could no longer ignore the smoke. But here's the twist. Instead of cutting ties outright, Netflix decided to test its leverage. An emissary, a senior executive with a reputation for being ruthless but polished, requested a private meeting with Meghan and Harry. The purpose? To deliver a message no one in Montecito wanted to hear. Protect the brand, or we walk. That was the ultimatum. Imagine sitting across a gleaming conference table, Meghan with her practiced poise, Harry with his simmering anger, as the executive laid it out bluntly. The monarchy is fighting back harder than we anticipated. We cannot risk being dragged into a lawsuit with Buckingham Palace. You need to scale back the content, edit future scripts, and avoid any disclosures that could be interpreted as private royal matters. Otherwise, the deal is finished. Do you hear the contradiction? The very platform that paid for their voices was now telling them to quiet down. Freedom, once promised in glowing contracts, suddenly had fine print attached. Meghan bristled. Her voice sharpened, cutting through the polished language of the executive. You wanted us because of who we are, because of our story. Now you're telling us not to tell it? That's exploitation. The executive leaned in, calm but firm. No, Duchess. That's business. Harry, caught in the crossfire, slammed his palm against the table. This is my life, my family, my truth, and now you're siding with them. His words hung heavy in the air, but the executive didn't flinch. In the world of billion-dollar streaming wars, emotion has no currency. Only numbers. Only risk. And that's when Meghan realized the truth. Hollywood wasn't her ally. It was a partner of convenience. A partner that would vanish the moment the scales tipped too heavily toward danger. The fairy tale of unconditional support from California's elites dissolved in that room. All that was left was cold negotiation. But this confrontation didn't stay secret for long. Whispers of the meeting began to leak. Reporters caught wind that Netflix was reconsidering its relationship with the Sussexes. Headlines spread like wildfire. Netflix wavers as palace applies pressure. Streaming giant faces royal headache. The speculation alone was enough to rattle Meghan and Harry's carefully built image of strength. Meanwhile, in London, William's camp celebrated. Not openly, not in champagne toasts, but in subtle nods and quiet satisfaction. His strategy was working. He hadn't needed to destroy Meghan and Harry's empire directly. He only had to make it radioactive enough that their allies destroyed it for him. Clever, isn't it? Ruthless. Now, pause here and ask yourself, was William really fighting for the monarchy's dignity, or was he playing a long, calculated game to choke his brother's new life at its root? Because what he achieved wasn't just legal positioning. It was psychological warfare. The contradictions became unbearable for Harry. He had left Britain to be free, yet here he was, trapped again, controlled again. Only this time, not by palace courtiers, but by Hollywood contracts. His outbursts at home grew sharper, arguments with Meghan more heated. He accused her of pushing too hard, of overplaying their hand. She accused him of weakness, of failing to stand by her as she faced the storm. And all the while, William's silence grew louder. He didn't need to give interviews. He didn't need to defend himself. His power was in restraint, letting the legal threats and leaked letters do the talking. For every word Harry and Meghan spoke, William's silence made them look more desperate. Isn't that a cruel irony? The brother who stayed quiet suddenly looked dignified, while the couple who spoke too much began to look frantic. Then, the next twist arrived, something no one had expected. A legal advisor, loyal to William, dropped a quiet suggestion that made the palace pause. What if they didn't just target Meghan and Harry's future projects? What if they went after what had already been released? Imagine it, seeking damages for claims made in Spare, challenging episodes of their Netflix series, demanding corrections or even retractions. The thought sent shivers even through the palace team. Could they really rewind history? Could they force Harry to rewrite his own story? William didn't hesitate. If they profited from lies, he reportedly said, then they should pay for them. The implications were staggering. It wasn't just about stopping future deals anymore. It was about clawing back the past, erasing Meghan and Harry's version of events, dismantling the very foundation of their narrative. Meghan and Harry's lawyers were horrified. They warned that such actions could drag the family's darkest secrets into courtrooms, exposing more than William bargained for. But William, steady and cold, had already accepted the risk. If the crown burns for truth, he declared, then let it burn. That phrase, let it burn, would soon echo across headlines. Not because William said it in public, but because someone leaked it. Was it a palace insider? A strategist playing double games? No one knew. But the world suddenly had its headline. William prepared to burn monarchy to protect it. And that headline stung. Because for Harry, it wasn't just legal strategy anymore. It was personal. He remembered the boy he once knew, the brother who played in gardens and shared whispers about their mother. That boy was gone, replaced by a man willing to torch everything to keep the crown untarnished. The global media frenzy reached fever pitch. Commentators dissected every word. Experts debated legal strategies. Fans of the monarchy praised William's courage. Defenders of Meghan and Harry decried his cruelty. The stage was set not for quiet negotiations, but for a public battle that would play out on the world's biggest stage. And yet, just when it seemed the lines were clear, the players fixed, and the outcome inevitable, another twist emerged. Because Hollywood wasn't finished. Not Netflix this time, but another giant. A studio with its own interests, its own billions at stake, and its own idea of how to exploit the royal war for profit. This studio wasn't backing away. In fact, it was preparing to double down, to make Meghan and Harry an offer so daring, so explosive, that it could reignite their empire and escalate the conflict with William to a level no one thought possible. And when that offer arrived, it wouldn't just test Harry and Meghan's resolve. It would test William's willingness to go further than anyone ever imagined. What happens when the world tells you no, but one powerful hand stretches out and says, yes, louder, bigger, bolder than ever before? What happens when the very threat meant to silence you becomes the spark that tempts you to speak louder than ever? That's the gamble Harry and Meghan suddenly faced when a new Hollywood giant slid into the battlefield. Not Netflix this time. Not Spotify. Not another streaming platform worried about Buckingham Palace's wrath. No, this was one of the oldest, most powerful studios in America. A name so entrenched in global entertainment that even the monarchy couldn't ignore it. The offer was staggering. A multi-million-dollar deal. A promise of complete creative control. And the project? A dramatized docu-series based not only on Harry and Meghan's story, but on the entire modern royal family. Scripts blending fact and fiction, actors portraying palace figures, real interviews woven into the narrative. Imagine The Crown, but raw, unauthorized, dripping with Meghan and Harry's perspective. The executives pitched it like this. If William wants to silence you, why not speak louder than ever? We'll package your truth into art. They can't stop art. They can't sue fiction. Can you feel the contradiction? Harry and Meghan, cornered by William's legal strike, suddenly being offered a stage bigger than anything they'd ever had before. The temptation was irresistible. The danger, undeniable. Meghan's eyes lit up. This was the counter-strike she had been waiting for. Not just interviews. Not just memoirs. A full-scale cultural weapon. The kind that would shape public perception for decades. She imagined the headlines. She imagined the awards. She imagined herself not as a victim, but as a visionary who turned her pain into power. But Harry wasn't smiling. His stomach twisted at the thought. A dramatization? Actors playing his brother, his father, his grandmother? Scenes reimagined, words rewritten? He could already picture the fury in William's eyes, the disgust in Charles's voice. Did he want to push them that far? Did he want to be the one who dragged the monarchy into open ridicule, not through journalism, but through entertainment? And yet, here's the cruel irony. Harry's hesitation only made Meghan more determined. To her, William's legal threats were proof that the monarchy feared her voice. And if they feared it, she believed, then she had to use it. Isn't that the contradiction? The harder William tried to silence her, the more powerful she felt. Now picture the palace's perspective. Advisors caught wind of the offer through whispers in Hollywood. Panic rippled through the corridors. A docudrama wasn't just another memoir. It wasn't another one-off interview. It was cultural storytelling, something that could be streamed, shared, clipped, and replayed endlessly. Something that would etch Meghan and Harry's version of events into the collective imagination of the world. Even if half of it was fiction, it wouldn't matter. People rarely remember court documents. They remember scenes, images, stories. William, briefed on the possibility, felt the heat rise in his chest. He paced, fists clenched. For years he had been portrayed as the steady brother, the dutiful heir. Now he was being threatened with caricature, with dramatization, with mockery. And for William, this wasn't just about image. It was about legacy. His children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, would one day inherit the throne. Would they also inherit a cultural library portraying their father as cruel, vindictive, weak? William swore he would never allow it. So the question sharpened. How far would he go? If lawsuits weren't enough, what was next? Meanwhile, in Montecito, Meghan began rallying. She called her closest Hollywood allies, painting the new offer as an opportunity for empowerment. This isn't about revenge, she told them. This is about truth. This is about reclaiming our story. But those closest to her knew better. They could see the spark in her eyes. They could feel the hunger. To Meghan, this wasn't just about truth. This was about victory. Harry, however, wrestled with a storm inside him. Each day, his doubts grew louder. He argued with Meghan late into the night. If we do this, we can never go back, he warned. It won't just be William's lawyers anymore. It'll be war. Total war. Do you want our children to grow up in the middle of that? Meghan's reply was sharp, almost cold. Our children deserve to see us fight for what's right. Do you see the fracture forming? The same fracture William hoped for. Every new offer, every new opportunity, wasn't just a decision about business. It was a decision about their marriage, their unity, their future. And here's where the story twisted again. Because the Hollywood giant didn't just make promises to Meghan and Harry. They began moving pieces behind the scenes, contacting writers, producers, even potential actors. Word leaked that casting calls were quietly being prepared. Imagine that. Actors lining up to audition for the role of William, of Kate, of Charles. of Diana and flashbacks. The tabloids caught wind. Headlines exploded. Unauthorized royal drama in the works. Harry and Meghan linked to explosive new series. The palace was forced to respond, issuing a rare public statement. The monarchy does not comment on fictional portrayals. However, any misrepresentation will be addressed appropriately. Translation? William was ready to fight, harder than ever. But the studio didn't back down. In fact, the leak seemed intentional. A way of testing the waters, stirring public curiosity, drumming up attention. And it worked. Social media buzzed with speculation. Who would play Meghan? Who would play William? Would Harry dare appear as himself? The very idea sent viewers into a frenzy. For Meghan, this was confirmation. The public was hungry. The stage was set. All they had to do was step into the spotlight. Yet for Harry, the frenzy felt like quicksand. Every headline, every tweet, pulled him deeper into regret. He thought of his brother, his father, his late grandmother. He thought of Diana, how she had used interviews, yes, but had also suffered when her words were twisted. Was he repeating her mistakes? Or was he honoring her legacy? And here's the haunting part. Even as Harry wrestled with doubt, even as William sharpened his legal weapons, the Hollywood deal moved closer to reality. Contracts drafted, lawyers briefed, writers brainstorming scenes that had never happened but would soon be etched into screens worldwide. The stakes had never been higher. William prepared to launch his most aggressive legal strike yet. Meghan prepared to unleash the boldest project of her career. And Harry? Harry stood in the middle, torn between loyalty, love, and fear. Because the next move wouldn't just decide the future of the monarchy. It wouldn't just decide the future of Meghan and Harry's empire. It would decide whether this family's private war would be remembered in dusty legal archives or dramatized forever on the global stage. And just as the contracts were about to be signed, just as Meghan prepared to lock in the deal of a lifetime, an unexpected visitor arrived at their Montecito mansion. Someone neither of them had spoken to in months. Someone with ties to both sides of the war. Someone carrying a warning that could change everything. What would you do if a ghost from your past appeared at your door? Not a literal ghost, but someone whose presence carried the weight of memories, alliances, and betrayals. That's exactly what happened on a quiet Montecito evening when Harry opened the front door and froze. Standing there, against the California twilight, was Princess Eugenie. Yes, Eugenie, the cousin who had remained one of the very few royals to show Harry any warmth after his departure. The one who visited them in America, who had once been photographed laughing with Meghan at a Super Bowl party. The one Harry still trusted, even when bridges with William and Charles had burned. But her visit now wasn't for laughs. Her face was pale, her tone urgent. She wasn't there for family bonding. She was there to deliver a warning. William knows about the Hollywood deal. She whispered the moment she stepped inside. Meghan stiffened. Harry's heart sank. How could William already know? The ink on the contracts wasn't even dry, and yet the future king was already ahead of them. Eugenie explained. Whispers inside the palace had turned into solid information. Advisors had confirmed that Meghan and Harry were negotiating with a major studio. Scripts were being drafted. Casting discussions had leaked. And William, furious, was preparing the most aggressive move yet. Not just legal action, not just public condemnation, but a full-on campaign to strip Harry and Meghan of the last royal privileges they still clung to. Titles, styles, security allowances, everything. Can you feel the magnitude of that? Stripping titles wasn't just symbolic. It was devastating. Without Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Meghan and Harry's brand collapsed overnight. Without Prince Harry, their memoirs, documentaries, even their speaking tours lost value. Who would pay millions for stories from just another couple in California? Meghan's face hardened. He wouldn't dare. But Eugenie's reply was immediate. He would. He's already drafting the request. Parliament's being briefed. That one word, Parliament, cut like a blade. Because once the machinery of the state became involved, this was no longer a family feud. This was monarchy versus renegades, backed by law, government, and public opinion. Harry felt sick. He thought of Diana again. How she had fought for her title after the divorce. How, even stripped of her royal highness, she remained the people's princess. Would he be forced to walk that same lonely road? Or worse, would his children inherit nothing? Meghan, however, wasn't shaken in the same way. If anything, the threat lit a fire in her eyes. "If they take our titles," she said coldly, "then we'll build our empire without them. We'll show the world that we don't need their names. We'll make our own." But here's the contradiction. Meghan's words sounded strong, yet deep down she knew the truth. Every deal, every contract, every invitation they'd ever received had been because of those very titles. Hollywood hadn't signed Meghan Markle and Henry Windsor. They'd signed the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Strip those away, and the shine fades. Eugenie, torn between loyalty to Harry and her position inside the family, lowered her voice. "You have to think carefully. William isn't bluffing. He's prepared to sacrifice everything to protect the crown. Even you." Harry's chest tightened. The brother he once adored, the boy he once followed into gardens and mischief, was now preparing to erase him from history. Was this really protection of the monarchy, or was it revenge? And then came the twist. Eugenie leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. "There's more. William isn't the only one who knows about the deal. Someone close to you leaked it." The room went still. Meghan's breath caught. Harry's fists clenched. A leak. From inside their circle. Was it a Hollywood agent chasing clout? A former friend turned opportunist? Or worse, was it someone inside Meghan and Harry's own team? Someone they trusted with contracts, scripts, secrets? Harry felt the room spin. Betrayal inside betrayal. If they couldn't trust William, couldn't trust Netflix, and now couldn't even trust their inner circle, who was left? Meghan demanded names, but Eugenie shook her head. "I don't know who. Only that William has details he could not have unless someone gave them to him directly. Do you see the layers here?" The palace wasn't just fighting them. Their own allies were feeding the fire. Harry slumped into a chair, his face pale. Meghan paced the room like a caged lioness. The Hollywood deal, once glittering with promise, now felt poisoned. Every angle, every step, seemed booby-trapped. And looming over them all was William, steady, unflinching, preparing to strike harder than ever. But here's where the emotional storm peaked. Meghan turned to Harry, her voice trembling but defiant. "We can't back down now. If we stop, we lose everything. If we go forward, at least we fight on our terms." Harry, his voice barely audible, replied, "And if fighting means we lose each other?" The silence that followed was heavier than any threat William could make. Because beneath the legal war, beneath the headlines and contracts, the real question was this. Could Harry and Meghan's marriage survive the pressure of a crown determined to destroy them? And just as the tension reached its breaking point, the phone rang. Meghan answered, her face tightening as she listened. When she hung up, her voice was cold, almost robotic. "That was the studio," she said. "They're ready to announce the project publicly." Harry's eyes widened. Now, Meghan confirmed. "And once they do, there's no going back." But what neither of them knew was that William had anticipated this exact move. And in London, even as the studio prepared its announcement, William's team was about to unleash their own bombshell. A revelation so damning, so calculated, that it would send shockwaves not just through Hollywood, but across the entire world. What kind of bombshell could William possibly unleash that would overshadow Hollywood's announcement? What revelation could shake Meghan and Harry so violently that the glittering promise of their new project would turn to ash before it even began? The answer came in the form of a dossier. Thick, cold, brutal, and it wasn't leaked to just one tabloid. No, William's team had calculated this strike with surgical precision. They delivered it to every major outlet in Britain simultaneously, knowing that within minutes the world would be devouring it. The headline ripped through social media like wildfire. Palace sources accused Sussexes of fabricating key stories in Netflix and Spare. Fabricating. Not exaggerating. Not embellishing. Fabricating. The dossier claimed that multiple scenes from the Sussexes' Netflix series and several anecdotes from Harry's memoir were demonstrably false. One example pointed to a dramatic story of Meghan being chased by paparazzi. Footage, the dossier alleged, had been staged using stock video from years earlier. Another flagged discrepancies in Harry's retelling of a family confrontation, with dates and locations failing to match palace records. Do you see the brilliance of William's move? By calling their integrity into question, he wasn't just fighting legally. He was poisoning their credibility. Because once the seed of doubt is planted, Every word Meghan and Harry speak is shadowed by suspicion. Hollywood noticed. Immediately. Within hours of the dossier's publication, the studio executives began panicking. Contracts, still unsigned, were suddenly under review. Emails that had been warm days before turned cold, clinical. "We must ensure accuracy," one message read. "We cannot risk association with claims now under investigation." Meghan's fury erupted like a storm. She slammed her phone down, pacing the Montecito mansion like a tigress. "He's trying to destroy us with lies," she shouted. "He's twisting everything to make us look like frauds." Harry sat silently, the color drained from his face. Because deep down, he knew some of William's accusations weren't lies. They weren't entirely wrong. Yes, they had dramatized. Yes, they had allowed scenes to be presented in a way that wasn't strictly accurate. That was Hollywood. That was publishing. That was how you made a story sell. But to William, that was ammunition. And here's the contradiction. Meghan saw the dossier as slander. Harry saw it as exposure. The very cracks William had targeted were the cracks Harry feared the most, that the world would see him not as a truth-teller, but as a manipulator of his own story. But William's strike didn't stop with the press. He had coordinated with Parliament. Within 24 hours of the dossier release, a parliamentary committee announced it would review the privileges of royal titles in cases where those titles are used for commercial gain against the interest of the monarchy. Translated into plain English, they were preparing to strip Harry and Meghan of their titles. The timing was devastating. Meghan and Harry's Hollywood project was poised for announcement. Instead, the headline screamed, "Sussex titles under threat as dossier reveals fabrications." The optics were catastrophic. Investors recoiled. The studio panicked. Suddenly, the Sussex brand didn't look bold. It looked toxic. And the public? Divided, yes, but shifting. Social media buzzed with threads dissecting every alleged fabrication. Videos comparing Netflix scenes with real footage went viral. Hashtags like #RoyalFabrications and #SussexLies trended globally. Supporters cried, "Smear campaign," but the damage was undeniable. Imagine being Meghan in that moment. Her Hollywood empire, once brimming with promise, collapsing like a house of cards. Imagine Harry, watching his brother's shadow loom larger with every headline, every news cycle. And imagine William, calm, collected, saying nothing publicly, letting the world draw its own conclusions while his team quietly celebrated the success of their masterstroke. But then came the most personal twist of all. The dossier didn't just target Meghan and Harry's projects. It included a section on Archie and Lilibet. Not accusations about the children themselves, but about the way Meghan and Harry had presented their role as parents in interviews. Subtle contradictions. Questions about timelines. Enough to cast doubt, enough to sting. For Harry, this was unforgivable. "He's dragging my children into this," Harry fumed, slamming his fist against the table. "He's not just coming for us. He's coming for them." And that's when Harry made a decision. A decision Meghan had been urging for weeks. "If he wants war," Harry growled, "then we'll give him war." Plans for the Hollywood project accelerated. Meghan contacted